Okay, I don't have a gavel. He's on board. Okay. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should have had Mr. Limble lead that. Simplified. That's right. Okay, I guess we have anyone sign in. Let me see it.
Yeah, just Bill.
Okay. Now, so, is Bill, talk to us for some purpose, other than spectator?
No, he wants to talk to you, that's fine.
All right, let's do that first.
The new assessment results came out, and they come out yesterday in the paper, and they're public. You can click on, look at any school, any county, and they're a whole lot different than last year. So I'm just going to do a real quick session here on where we were and where we're going, and it's pretty complex. Let me.
It's even complex than
I think we did the paperwork.
It's taken.
All else fails. There.
There's my electrician. He's 13 months old, already wired. So he does have a union card too.
Better be sure of that.
I'm building a little cabin up on the farm up there, and I was running wire, and he's 13 months, he's crawling around there, and I stuck that wire through and kind of wiggled. He grabbed it, pulled it on through, and just looked at me and smiled. So,
He's natural with it.
In your packet, you have one that looks like this. No child left behind, going to a growth model. Okay, we have been under the No Child Left Behind, and as you remember, by 2014, 100% of our kids were supposed to be proficient, and we knew when that happened, that wasn't going to go. So they went with a flexibility waiver and started some new assessments. And it's pretty complex. You have two indicators. You actually have two indicators. Get all that up here. You have it. You have three indicators now. And I'll explain a little bit more about what the West Virginia Accountability Index is on the next page. But you have three indicators. First is the West Virginia Accountability Index. You'll see it as WVAI. And this is based on scores from last year's West Test, 2012. And when they looked at the scores, they set these index scores by different grade levels. Elementary schools by 2020 will have to have a score of 81. Middle school will have to have a score of 75, and high school will have to have a score of 76. Just on that one indicator, the West Virginia Accountability Index. Okay? Also, the other indicator, by 2020, 75% of the students have to be proficient in all subgroups. Okay? That's better than 100%, as we all know. Okay? One of the things that really changed that's going to affect us is this subgroup. Under No Child Left Behind, if you had 49 students, it did not count against you for accountability. You had to have at least 50 students. Under the new accountability, if you have 20 students, then it's counted as accountability. So we'll have a lot more subgroups, especially in special education and some other areas. When we're talking about subgroups, when you start looking at the data, our low socioeconomic status students will be the same as all, because all our kids get free lunches. So they won't be broken up differently. Okay, this was also a change, a full academic year, 135 days at one school, then you're accountable. Before, with No Child Left Behind, you had to be there the 5th instructional day and then be there until the 2nd day of the West Test, which was almost usually at the end of the year. So basically, you almost had to be there all year to be accountable at that school. But now, it's if you're there 135 days. And some of these things, which we didn't know, actually kicked in with the assessment this year, because the waiver went back last year to 2012 data and started with that. Okay? Even though we was playing with one rule, because of the waiver, they went back and it changed some schools and put some more groups in. Okay, the other one is we still have to have a participation rate of 95% in each subgroup. And if you don't have the 95%, you're automatically a support school. Because we was looking at a school that's in Kanawha County that always has high achievement. They met everything, but they didn't meet the participation rate in one subgroup, so they're classified as a support school, but they're trying to fix that. Okay? Okay? Schools have different starting points. Okay? It's based on last year's West Test scores. Different starting points for each school based on 2012 West Test results. This is both for the index scores and the proficiency rates. I'll show you on the next slide what that means. You will see some schools with higher achievement and or index score that will be designated as lower level than a school with higher achievement and a higher index score. What's that?
With lower.
With lower, yes, achievement. Okay. You can no longer compare schools based on school designations. You can't say, well, this school's a support school, this school's a success school, because they all start at a different point. And on the next slide, if you'll turn the page, I'll show you what we're talking about. This index is a total of 100 points, okay? The percent of students proficient counts for 40 points, or 40% of that 100 on the elementary middle school level, 35 points on the high school level. Okay, and you can see some of the index scores down through there. The achievement gap's closed. That is those subgroups. If there is a subgroup like special ed, and they're scoring real low compared to non-special ed students, then that is a large achievement gap, and that's where they're looking to close those achievement gaps. And that's where when we start talking about these schools, that's where a focus school comes in. That's a focus school that has a large achievement gap. Okay? Observed growth is actually how much you grew. Okay? You look at last year's test scores, you look at this year's test scores. And that tells you how much you grew within that year. And at the elementary's 15% of this index, high school's 5%. Adequate growth is there's a trajectory that you started at this certain point, okay? By 2020, you have to meet that index score. And it has it broken down each year how far you should move. So if you did not move enough, they take that total and they average it by the number of years and say, okay, you should move this much this year, this much this year. And if you did not move that whole bit, you didn't get all the adequate points there. It basically they're saying you're not moving fast enough to get to the goal of 75 or 76 or 81, whatever school you're in. Okay? The attendance in elementary is 5% of the index. The graduation rate at high school is 30%, with a total index score of all of 100. Now, this is what we're talking about here a little bit, about looking at the different index scores. If you look over, here's how our schools are classified. Lincoln County High School and Midway are priority schools. Okay, and priority schools are some of the lowest performing schools. They're in that category for 3 years. It doesn't make any difference how they score this year, next year, they're in that category for 3 years. Okay? A focus school, which is Hamlin and Duval, they may have met the index, achievement and everything, but they were selected last year, before this year's data come back, as a focus school because of those achievement gaps, large achievement gaps. They have to stay in that category 2 years. Okay? The other schools we have is Guy Valley. They met one of the indicators. So if you meet one of them, then you're a transition school. If you meet all of them, you're a success school, like Ranger. If you don't meet any of them, you're a support school, which is where West Hamlin fell. Okay?
And we don't have the data on Hearts.
We don't have-
It's coming.
It's coming. They kind of thought it was just a 1 year, been there 1 year, and it's really been there. They had test scores for 2 years, and we've been hounding them, and they said we should have it by the end of next week, hopefully.
I
Okay?
thought I saw it on the internet yesterday.
Hearts is not on there. We'll go to that page, and if you want me to, show you what all that means real quick. Okay, now this is what I'm talking about, okay? For if we look, for example, at West Hamlin. West Hamlin had an index score of 41.17, but their target was 61.31 based on last year's score. But if you go up to Hamlin, they met their index score because their target based on last year's data was 32.32. So it's based on, each year, it's based on growth. It's not one school compared to another school, it's what your school is doing. Okay? And the same with achievement. If you look over at achievement, this is what our achievement was this year at each school. Hearts, that was on there, but they did not have the school designation yet. But if you look, you can see what some of these total index target was and what they met to decide that. And if you look, for example, if you look, say, at West Hamlin. West Hamlin in math had a 48.09. That is higher than any school other than Ranger. But because they did so well on the test last year, they didn't score as high, so they did not grow. So that's the reason they're a support school. It's based on growth. Okay? Okay.
This is all based on West Texas.
We-
The text that children don't take serious.
Yeah. One of the things is that when you're doing so well, you're doing really well, then are you going to be growing, by leaps and bounds the next year if you're almost there? Well, probably not. So we're thinking,
Well, eventually, it's gonna come a time when you can't grow. When that probably dip down a little bit.
Once you get to the top, there's only one other way, down the other side.
I mean, it's hard to explain when the school has the highest achievement and almost the highest index score, but we'll get there. But, any question about any of that?
But all schools in 2020 should be real close to each other, supposed to be real.
They all should be trying to get there to the same point. to the
So
same-
how many subgroups can you have, Mr. Clement?
Well, in our county, usually the subgroup, since we do not have low socioeconomic status because all of it gets free lunch, we will have a white subgroup and we'll have a special ed subgroup, probably the only ones that we'll have. But
there are several.
there's
What are the
several, yeah,
others
there's
that some of them-
Asian, Hispanic, Black, I think there's 9 subgroups.
But you'd have to have 20 kids.
You'd have to have 20
Yeah.
kids in that school, in
Yeah.
grades 3 through 11. Okay, now, this is the site that some of you probably have gone to. This is a site, a public site where everyone can go look. If you just go to the Department of Ed, to their homepage over on the left, it says My School's Performance, and click on it, and then go on over and click My School's Performance again. And if you see, for example, like Duval, they're a focus school because they're on it for 2 years, but this year, they met their index, they met their reading math, they met their participation rate, but they're still a focus school because the focus school's there for 2 years. Okay? If I was a principal, that's one I'd be mad about. If I'm mad about it, I can't get them. Okay, and then when you go on down, here is, on down, when you first go in, it'll tell you, like for Duval, it says how many kids at grade level how many kids at grade level expectations today? Out of 40%, 13.22 is there. But if you click on this, that bubble, it'll tell you your school earned 33.05% of the 40% points in that group. Okay? The state average for middle schools was 47.64. The highest was 78.99, and then the lowest was 23.55.
But Duval's was 33.
Duval's is 33.05. So, and it does that, I won't show you all of them because I know you have other things to do, but if you click on all those, it tells you the very same thing. And then if you go down, this is where you couldn't see today. It has this trajectory. If you look at Duval, here's 2012, you go up to the little dot. Last year they had 45.03% of the students proficient in total. That was all students. Okay, the little red dot or diamond is 2013, tells you that they come down a little bit, but they're still on trajectory to meet that. Okay? Now, if you want to look at subgroups, you just come to total. Our white and all's almost the same. But if we go to special ed subgroup, you see how the trajectory, the line moved. This is where the special needs kids were last year, 11.76. This year, they're at 17.39. And if you go up 2014, it has the numbers, taking the number of years it takes to get there to get to 75%, how much you should grow each year. Okay. When you go in here, if you go to the elementary, let's look at this. There's a lot of places in a lot worse shape we are. There was one, let me just do that one real quick. Let me just go to the elementary Ranger. You go down to the total index score. Rangers was 71.02. That's adding all those that we showed up there. But there's one elementary school total index score of 11.18. Total. We don't know where that is, but we're glad it's not one of ours. So so they're gonna have a long way to grow. But that's basically the site there. And in your packet, you also have some color copies. It tells you what a success school is. It tells you, yours is, everybody have that? Then it tells you what a transition school is, defines it, a support, a focus, and a priority. And I think we may, would you want to do something later to show the growth of schools and?
Yes.
Okay.
This was just a quick informational presentation because we knew that the information came out. It was embargoed after 10 o'clock yesterday, and we were not sure when they were going to put it out. They kept giving us different times, so we wanted you all not to read before you were given the information here. So,
I learned a lot, I learned how to, where they got the target in at, and I didn't know how they come up with that. I knew all schools were different, but it's, and
It's-
on them graphs down there, you click on them, learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah, just click on it, shows you where they are, where they need to be, and the subgroups.
It
It's,
explains a lot of things that we were talking about.
Yeah, you and I were
Being a
talking.
school of excellence, and then, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of tells you how that kind of.
Steve, I'm just conscious of how to present this. It's a chestnut every year, you know. It's been a fairly negative story some years. I've tried to be positive the last 2 years about it, and I hope to do the same this year. But just from listening to Bill and talking to him today, I may take it a school week by week for 8 weeks, which I think would take away the focus from comparing, which people are tempted to do, and zone in on the positive where it can be found at each school. But I've asked the two of yourselves for a comment. I emailed you both, so that's the way I'm thinking right now, that I'll do Duval next week and Hamlin the following week and spread it out. Maybe.
yes, because you would be able to focus on the growth.
Yeah, yeah, instead of,
And the, yes, because they did, and our schools did grow.
yeah.
It's just the way that they came out with this
Well, and what-
designations.
And it shows that that all schools are, the way that their starting points are different.
Yeah. But if you throw it all out at one go,
Right.
the temptation is to compare,
Everything.
yeah. Which is reasonable, but it's not fair to the schools, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lamble.
You're
Sure,
welcome.
We'll be seeing you again if you actually come explain more of this to us. I know a lot more than I do, but I'll tell you that much.
well, I'm gonna say this. So this, Mr. Midkiff, back me up. We've had just about zero training on how to explain this. A lot of things now, let's wait, I'll say it, I mean, there's a lot of things coming down, and there's not a lot of training going on with it now that we need.
Well, but my growth was so low.
You would be a success.
I could only go, I had nowhere to go with that. Thank you, Bill, appreciate it.
Your trajectory's on track now?
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll go on to the personnel section of the agenda. We have a motion. Mr. Allister, Mr. Wilkes. I see Mr. Meeks.
I'm ready tonight. Been dirty.
He's flexible. Okay, Trish.
Okay, this is a very short personnel schedule. We have employment of professional personnel pending the FBI CIB clearance and issuance of the first base permit. In Section A, Section B is transfer of service personnel. Section C is leave of absence. And Section D is resignation and or retirement, and that's noted under the effective date. This way, we're ready to be able to put out another vacancy this tomorrow, now that things are taken care of, so. that would be-
Actually, Jim about that earlier, he said tomorrow. Okay, anybody have any questions on any of those things? If not, we'll call for vote. All those in favor of the personnel items? Yes. Anybody opposed? That'd be an all yes vote. Okay. Well, we're at that inevitable time, Sean.
It's fine.
We're getting close here. But no, a meeting tonight is required by law to annually establish the goals for our superintendent. And you have to do that to September 15th each year, so we're doing that now. And then sometime prior to the end of the year, probably in June or so, we will then go back and evaluate, see how she's done on this goal. So it's the same procedure we've done for the last, I guess this is our third year doing this. That's why after we regained local control, we found out that this is something you have to do. When the state was in control, it was done, I guess. But anyway, what I'd like to have now then is a motion to go into executive session as allowed by 6-984 personnel matters to work on the goals.
So moved.
Mr. Brooks made the motion.
I second.
Ms. Smith seconded. Is that all yes?
Yes.